This is From the Courtroom to the Boardroom, the podcast for the next generation of legal leaders with me, Simon Gibson. I was a lawyer for 13 years until I walked away from legal practice and entered the world of business. I'm now CEO of the Spirant Group and I lead a portfolio of businesses in the UK and Australia. On this upbeat podcast, I tackle the big issues facing law firms and businesses alike with the help of intriguing guests. Are you ready to rewrite the script? Then it's great to have you along for the ride.
Hello friends, welcome to the podcast. Nice to have your company again. In business, reputation is everything. And in the legal profession, how we're perceived by our clients, by our teams, and by our professional partners is very important in terms of dictating the success of our own career and also that of the law firm or the business that we work for. But my own personal experience during my own legal career was that whilst that was always underlined as an important point, I didn't necessarily have the expertise or the resource at my disposal to properly understand what reputation means, how it is built, and particularly how I develop my own personal brand. So that's what I want to explore today, because I know it's a challenge faced by many members of the legal profession. And it's very important that we have some expert advice to help us with the journey. And along those lines, I'm very happy to welcome Amelia Sordell to the podcast today as my expert guest. Amelia is the founder and leader of Klowt, which is a branding agency, but with a difference. They don't brand businesses, they brand people. Amelia started Klowt during lockdown and has since built it to a 7-figure turnover enterprise based in London, working with individuals in all sectors. In addition, Amelia is a successful podcaster in her own right. She hosts the Branded podcast and is generally regarded as one of the leading experts in personal branding. We're absolutely thrilled to welcome Amelia to the podcast. And on that note, Amelia, welcome. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thanks for having me. God, what an intro. I'm blushing.
Did I forget anything?
No, I feel like you've really overinflated my ego here. I'm going to be walking out of the office with a massive head.
Well, I mean, that's usually the way I try and kick things off. So that's got us off on a good footing. First of all, just before we get stuck into this issue of what a personal brand is and how you help individuals build one, just tell us a little about your own story today. How did you come to be leader and founder of Klowt?
Yeah, it's a good question. I always say to people, I wish I'd kind of seen personal branding was this kind of a growing industry, and I was just really smart and business savvy and started a business in that industry. But actually, the reality is, I was a recruiter for some time and a lazy one at that. And what I mean by that is I didn't see the point of making 100 calls a day. It just seems like a total waste of time to me. And so when I was thinking about how I could potentially streamline my sort of outbound reach, if you like, as a recruiter, it made the most sense to me to, instead of me having to go out and seek these sort of clients that I wanted to deal with, they should seek me instead. And so what I did was I'd put out pieces of content. I would DM them and give them information on particular topics or their competitors or things like that I thought they would find interesting that wasn't a sales pitch. So in many respects, I was building my personal brand without even realizing. I didn't know that's what it was called. And I was very successful in that. And I built a lot of money in doing that. And the company that I was working for at the time saw that I was doing this and thought, actually, however she's marketing herself as a recruiter is obviously working. So maybe we could sort of have her come into the marketing department and teach the other guys how to do this. So I did that for a little bit. And then I guess because I was so good at personal branding myself, again, I didn't even know this was what it was called at the time. I then went out to, was building my personal brand about content and, recruitment, marketing things, all the things I was doing on. And then I got headhunted because my personal brand was so strong to go and work for a private equity company. And it was whilst at that private equity company where I was helping portfolio businesses build their personal brands as founders that I decided that I wanted to go and do it on my own and not necessarily rely on anyone for a paycheck anymore. And so when the pandemic happened, it seemed like now was the best time. Like if I was in the middle of the global pandemic, when the world was ending and I wasn't going to go out and do something myself, when was I going to do it? So quit my job on Friday, started Klowt on the Monday, Had the first 2 clients on Thursday and never looked back.
Wow. Well, I mean, that says something about you, the fact that you were prepared to make that big life step in such a chaotic period as COVID. I mean, I've tracked we first spoke about 18 months or so ago, and I remember the size of the team and the business you described then, and I've seen your progress on social media since, and it does seem to have been a meteoric rise in Klowt. So what's your secret? How have you managed to achieve that level of growth?
It's a good question. To be honest, like 90% of our inbound stuff comes to my DM as well. It was up until recently. I think about 30% of it now comes through our website, but that's purely through the brand that Klowt is. Like, people recognize Klowt as a personal branding agency of substance now. So we get a lot of referrals through the website as a result of that. And actually, I think that's something we should probably talk about how the fact that my business is now standing up against my personal brand as well. Now it's not just Klowt founded by Amelia Sordell, it's Klowt and then Amelia Sordell. So we can talk about that in a second. But I think to your question about the growth has come because I have just been relentless in posting. I've been relentless in commenting on people's stuff. I've been relentless in hiring the right people and getting rid of the wrong people, and being really just having an incredibly high expectation of like what I expect from my team, but also what I expect from myself. And I think, I talk a lot about this online, and it's funny because my personal brand started off being about personal branding, but I think it's more segued now into, high performance startups and leadership and, growth, and kind of being the no bullshit thought leader in many respects of like what it takes to build a fast growing team and a high profit team. Because I think there's a lot of narrative online about, have balance. And if you don't have balance, then you're going to burn out. And, people sort of in many ways tricking younger generations into thinking that having a high growth business and having a high performing career is very much about like getting your ducks in a row and not putting too much effort in, when actually the reality is you have to work your absolute tail off to get anywhere. And so to answer your question very simply, the growth has come from just being absolutely bullish with what I wanted to achieve, which was I wanted to position Klowt as my goal has always been be the best, not the biggest. And my growth has come from me being absolutely relentless in being positioned and then becoming, as a result of being positioned strategically, the best personal branding agency globally. And I would say we're pretty good in the UK now in terms of market share, but we're now heading Middle East and the US, and we're trying to just chip away at that until we have that same thought process, the same sort of feelings about the brand there too. So yeah. Fluffy answer, but it's the truth.
It wasn't fluffy at all. It was great to hear you talk about this issue of commitment. I do get a little bit tired of hearing about work-life balances, because quite often when people talk about a work-life balance, what they mean is reduction in work. And it's never something I've subscribed to. I think it's important to carve out a career that you love. And if you were able to do that, why would you want to reduce the amount of work that you do? So you're preaching to the choir here in terms of the importance of hard work, sweating the detail, being resilient, being committed. And I would recommend that to anyone. And I think you're living, breathing epitome of the fact that can lead to some pretty exceptional results.
Oh, it's like we live in this world that's designed for comfort, right? We do things like we pay someone to deliver our food on a bicycle, and I do that too. Every lunchtime, someone comes and delivers my lunch to me because I don't want to have the discomfort of having to leave my desk, potentially run a meeting short, and go walk across the road to get my salad. Like, we live in a world that avoids discomfort at every single turn. But I was interviewing Ash Dykes yesterday for the podcast, which is I can't wait to release. Like, it's such a good episode. But he's a 3-time record holder. Like, the guy's only died like 3 times, right?
I've met Ash. He was on my last podcast. He's awesome, isn't he?
Yeah. He's just like, and this, like I'm saying, like the experiences this guy has had are like not just mentally sort of mind blowing, but like the physical shit that he voluntarily puts himself through is insane. And we were talking about this whole idea of like resilience and this kind of stuff, and how people are quite soft these days. And I said to him, quite like jokingly, but actually on reflection, I think I'm onto something with this. I said, we need to bring back bullying. We need to bring back that like acceptance of, people are going to pick on you, and it is kind of a tough life. And actually, obviously I don't mean actually literally bullying, but I mean like that resilience of like, stuff happens and it's tough and whatever. And actually you're not made, you're not chipped away at in the moments where it feels comfortable. You think about ourselves as a piece of rock. The things that make us shape that rock into something beautiful is when you're chipping away at it, right? And it's the stress that chips away at that. It's the hard times that you have to get through. It's the fuck, I have no money in my bank account. I have a mortgage due in 2 weeks. It's the, how am I going to do, like, it's those really hard, I'm in a corner and I have no other option here than to fight my way out that makes you as a human being. And I think as a society, particularly in the West, we sort of discourage people from putting themselves in that position because like, oh no, you might get hurt. But actually it's those I might get hurt moments that really is the making of you. So when we talk about, work-life balance and stuff, do you want work-life balance or do you want a fucking exceptional life? Because I don't think you can have both, not least certainly at the beginning of your career or your business.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting you should say that. I agree with you. It was Stress Awareness Day a couple of weeks ago, and I actually posted on LinkedIn on about this. I do think we should be aware of stress, but being aware of it doesn't mean avoiding it. On the contrary, as you've just said, exposing ourselves to suffering and challenge, it does make us stronger. I mean, stress is like a bicep. And if you want to get a bigger, stronger bicep, you don't do that by keeping the weights low or avoiding the gym altogether. It's only by exposing yourself to being outside of your comfort zone. That's where true growth lies. And I think that's a message which is perhaps neglected. And it's particularly good, if I may say, to have someone like yourself who is so sophisticated in terms of your understanding and your implementation of social media strategy, because there's a lot of the sort of opposite end of the coin that I read on social media, which is about self-care and self-love and self-well-being and that sort of thing. And I'm not knocking any of that, but most people that I encounter who have delivered sustained success, they've got the bruises, they've been through the tough times, they've walked the hard yards. And I think the more people we can get talking about the benefits of that, the better.
It's interesting you use before we move on, it's interesting that you use the bicep analogy, because I use the gym analogy a lot. I love analogies because it helps people understand complex ideas, right? Because it makes it simple. But you think about a muscle, right? If you wanted to get bigger, if you wanted to get more lean even, you need to tear your muscle apart in order to rebuild it, to grow it, right? And that's where you get that pain from after you've done a good workout. That's that nice, like, oh, I feel sore today, because you've actually ripped all the fibers in your muscles, right? And that's what your life is like. It's the stress is ripping the fibers of your being, of your brain, of your chemical makeup to then rebuild it stronger so you can get bigger, so you can get tougher, so you can achieve those things that you want to achieve. And particularly for my age group, like I'm 32, I think people really think that I should be standing here going, take care of yourself, guys. Make sure that you're, putting your face mask on at night and, don't whatever. Meanwhile, those same people that are preaching those types of things are probably scrolling through TikTok between 1 and 2 p.m. every single night. Is that self-care? I don't think so. No. My self-care is I'm taking care of my family. I'm taking care of my future. I'm building something that's going to be my legacy. But, self-care and well-being isn't about being kind to your diary. It's about what is going to make me the best version of myself. And actually, it's scientifically proven that stress makes you better as a little bit, not too much, but a little bit of stress makes you better in terms of your output, your resilience, your mental well-being, your actual mental health. And there's also been very, very big studies done on the impact that stress has, particularly on men. Men need stress in order to thrive, period. That's a proven medical study that's been done. Men particularly need to be in highly stressful environments in order to survive and thrive. And I guess that comes from biology of this hunter-nurturer thing. Women biologically, we're much more emotionally intelligent typically. So we're kind of the nurturer, and then the male figure is the hunter-gatherer. So they put themselves in stressful situations, which then is the making of them, because, if they fought off a bear one day, it's going to be stronger the next time they face the next bear, that type of thing. So stress is good for you. I don't like this narrative that stress is not a good thing.
No, and there's an evolutionary underpinning to that. You talk there about building your best self, letting people get to their full potential. Is that what a personal brand is? Is it your best self?
I love that you brought this up, Simon, because personal branding is something I'm very passionate about. And I think that comes across, at least hopefully on this podcast, but also in the content that I produce, right? But Personal branding itself is not my purpose. My purpose is to enable people to take accountability of their own lives, stop waiting for a handout to be saved, and to save the damn selves, right? That is what personal branding does. Personal branding allows you to create a platform with your own hands. You get your own bricks to build your own platform, to stand up and say, hey, opportunities come to me. That is what personal branding is all about. And the byproduct of that is becoming your best self. I am the most confident, happiest, financially free, all insert every single goal that I possibly could have had when I was 21 right now, because I built my personal brand. And none of that would have been possible. I would never have had this opportunity to do things like this. I would never have the opportunity to be, I was on ITV News the other day talking about branding. Like, none of these things would have happened. And you might be listening to that going, oh, why would you want to be on the news? Because of the opportunities it's going to give me, because of the money it's going to make my business, because of the exposure that gives me and the impact that I can have on individual people to say, hey, if I can do it, and I'm a single mom of 2, I'm divorced, you can do it too. So that is to me what personal branding is. It's it's the opportunities that delivered into your lap.
Yes, and it's interesting you use that phrase about why would you do something, because it seems to me that in all sort of marketing and branding there has to be a why. So let's just cover on that. Why does everyone need a personal brand, or do they already have one? And if they need one, why do they?
I think everyone does have a personal brand, for sure. Like, you have a personal brand with your family. I have a personal brand with my kids, with my team. I have a personal brand with the receptionist. I have, shout out Leslie, they're amazing. I have a personal brand with, the barista that makes my coffee every day. I also have a personal brand with 140,000 people that follow me on LinkedIn. I have a personal brand with 500,000 people that have liked my content on TikTok, or 1 million people that have liked my TikTok content. The people that view my YouTube, every person I have an interaction with, I have a personal brand with, right? And I think the whole point of personal branding as a concept is about shaping and strategizing of what you want that personal brand to be. What do you want people to think of you when you're not in the room? What conversations do you want your name to be a part of when you're not there? What impression do you want people to have of you when you're not in earshot? Like, even little things, like I will make a point of when I'm having dinner with someone or whatever, to ask the waiter what their name is. So when they bring things over to me, I can say, thank you, Steve, or thank you, Alex, or thank you, whatever, because I know that by doing that little tiny thing, that's going to make them feel great and heard and seen and confident and all those things. And that is part of my personal brand. I want to instill that in other people. And so I take that not just online to be like, hey guys, be confident. I'm like, no, I'm going to take that into my life too, because that is what I believe to be my personal brand, my North Star, what I want to be known for. So yes, you have a personal brand already, but what it looks like is up to you. And if you don't intentionally shape it, I think the personal brand that you actually end up with is going to be one that you don't like.
Yeah, I suppose the question people might have then, I agree with you when you say that we all have a personal brand to some extent. So if we've all got one already, why worry about building it? Why not just let it mature organically?
Because you can only reach a certain number of people if you don't do anything with it. I can reach millions of people with a single press of a button. And that gives me a million opportunities that you don't get because you haven't made an effort to kind of bring it out of just your close circle. The thing is about life is we only really consider about 50 to 150 people in our life. Like, quite literally, you think about the people that are in your conscious decision making. It might be your husband, your wife, your kid, your colleague, the news reader on the TV. There's about 50 to 150 people that typically people consider, which means that when you're making decisions and you're having interactions with people, these are the only people that you give a shit about, which means that you're limiting how many people can impact your life. When you think about things in a much bigger scope of, okay, it's not 50 to 150 people care about, I care about everyone, and I care about everyone that could potentially give me an opportunity and potentially I could give an opportunity too, you then start scaling your personal brand. It's no longer about just those 50 to 150 people that can help shape your life. It's about millions of people that can help shape your life. And it's not necessarily about getting the better opportunities, which they do come. They're a lot better when you scale up. But it's about making it so much more niche, you becoming the person, not a person amongst many, and positioning yourself as an absolute authority and being probably, as I am, almost the most preferred person in an industry or the most preferred person in whatever. Because that is the power of personal branding. It's not necessarily that you put a piece of content out and, 100,000 people saw it. Excellent. What am I going to do with 100,000 views? But it's 100,000 people that viewed that content that are now talking about my name in a room that I didn't have access to. And that is why you should build your personal brand, not for the vanity metric, but for what it can deliver to you. But to your original question, should everyone build one? No, if you don't want to build one, I'm not going to convince you, but just know that there are other people in your industry who are doing it, and they're going to be one that's getting opportunities like you.
Podcast today is brought to you by Zeus Tech Solutions, who provide dev on demand for law firms. When I was managing partner of a law firm, recruiting and retaining top tech talent was one of the biggest challenges. And we're still, because we didn't have the knowledge in the business to manage and coach a technical team, it was a constant cycle of frustration, downtime, lost revenue, and proclaim lying dormant. Well, for the past 5 years, Zeus have looked after both of Spire & Group's law firms in the UK and Australia, and it's been a game changer. Now we get all of our tech on tap, from IT director to .NET developer. We get that whenever we want. Zeus provide the best use of tech to all of our fee earners with no recruitment fees and absolutely no nonsense. So if you're a law firm who are frustrated with their tech anywhere in the world, go to www.zeustechsolutions.co.uk and hit the live chat option, and the answer to all of your tech solutions, however specific they are, is right there. Better still, if you mention that you heard about Zeus on the podcast, you will get a free health check for your case management system. So that's Zeus Tech Solutions, dev on demand for law firms. And now on with the podcast.
You've just given us a great why there. It's not about the vanity piece. I get a little bit skeptical sometimes when I see some of the same messages being trotted out on social media, which just tend to attract likes. Quite often it's around diversity and inclusion, which is a fantastic message, but I do sometimes get the impression that it's used as a signal for virtue. It can be about just following the crowd on a particular news story. It can be about adopting a moral position. But what you've just said there, Amelia, is it's about the why. It's about the outcome rather than just the immediate feedback that you get. Let's just bring this back, if I may, into a legal setting, because the vast majority of our audience is either from the legal sector. They're lawyers, they're barristers, they're representatives of law firms, or they're in the wider legal industry. It's particularly crucial as a lawyer, I think, that you think about your brand, the way you perceive, for two reasons. The first is because businesses and consumers who wish to approach law firms, they tend to really care about the reputation of the lawyer, about how they are approachable or that sort of thing. And the second thing is because I think historically lawyers have been so dreadful at promoting themselves in a way that both is positive and which differentiates themselves with the standard legal stereotype. So I guess, first of all, what's your view on that in terms of, is there a brand that you as a non-lawyer would associate with the legal profession? Is it a positive one? And do you think that lawyers who are so inclined have an opportunity to break that down?
I think the first thing to say in relation to the legal profession particularly is that there are very few people who take personal branding seriously, and therefore there is a huge opportunity for you to take their opportunities from them, right? And if we break that down into its simplest form, the reason why that is true is because, as you pointed out, people don't, just regardless of whether you're B2B or B2C, people are not going to trust you with their shit that they've got going on, whether it's a divorce or contracts or whatever it might be, if they don't trust you, right? And so if you're having to come into meetings to convince someone to trust you, you've really lost. You've really lost. So why wouldn't you want to take control of that initial top of funnel conversation, that narrative, and position yourself as a trustworthy legal professional before they even get in touch? Because you're going to save yourself a lot of time with pitches that you don't win, a lot of time with conversations that you have that don't end up becoming anything. And we know you're short on time, right? I've seen my lawyer bills. They charge me a lot of money. They don't have a lot of time clearly they have limited time because that's why it's so expensive, right? So if you're short on time, then wouldn't you want to streamline that top of funnel so you're only having conversations with people that are actually going to turn into business? And when you ask that question about who do you think of in the law profession, the three people that I immediately think of are all personal brands, not law firms. So Ada Stevenson, who is a contract tech lawyer, think of her immediately. I think of Jonathan Morrell, who's a divorce attorney in America. He's decent on LinkedIn. He's pretty big on LinkedIn. And then I think of the legal queen on TikTok. Those are the three people that I immediately thought of, which fair enough, I'm biased. I work in the personal branding space. I like following people. But I think if you ask a lot of people in those particular spaces, I think they would say the same thing. Those are three of the people that they would think of. And then I go, oh, wait, there are bigger ones too. What are they called? IDG5? Like what? Like, I don't know what these big companies, these big law firms are called, because they've all got these massive long ass names that to me sound like an accountant and snore the hell out of me. Whereas I much prefer to work with Jonathan or Alice. All right. And I would like to think I'm a fairly sophisticated business person, and that's me saying that, right? So imagine what the general public think about it when you think about this white papers that law firms put out, or these snotty, complex, tweets. Like, no, people buy from people, particularly in professional services, right? If you're going to be my lawyer, I want to know who you are. I want to put a face to the name, and I want to know that I can trust you damn well with my money, my defense, my contracts, my everything. And that is why personal branding for lawyers, I think, is so big.
Yeah, I mean, you're dead right. I mean, let me just use this example of the twist that the legal sector has got itself into. You've just said people buy from people, which is quite right. Yet what the majority of the legal sector tries to do is to prevent their people from developing a personal brand by forcing them to operate under the law firm's brand umbrella very restrictively. So, for example, a good friend of mine, she's just been made partner at a big international commercial practice. And she's constantly being told, raise your profile, get out there, increase your network, increase your reputation. Yet she asked recently if she could have funding for a personal website. And she was very quickly turned down. And the reason she was turned down, they said, was because they were uncomfortable with her building her own profile, because they were concerned that in due course she might leave the firm and take her following with her. So whilst she's being constantly encouraged to grow her profile, what they actually mean is just, we want you to earn us more money. And we don't really care how you do it. And we're certainly not going to help you or indeed support you in doing it, but just kind of find a way. And I just think that's so back to front, because ultimately it's restrictive, because she's a great person and she's got a strong message, she's got a wonderful personality, but they just wanted to operate as a stereotype of the rather dull corporate brand that they've built. What's your advice for her, Amelia?
I think my first bit of advice would be to the employer. Like, where is your growth mindset here? What if you're so concerned about someone building their brand and then leaving you? It says more about your employment kind of culture and also who you hire, maybe, and how to lead than anything. My team and I appreciate it's a like for like comparison, but my team get headhunted every day. None of them have left so far, and that's because I am trying my best anyway to be the best employer I can possibly be within reason. And they enjoy working here. We make it a fun environment. So if you're worried about your team leaving because they build their personal brand, I think it says more about you as an employer than it does about your team. I think also, if you're going to say, go and build your brand, go and build your brand, go and build your brand because it benefits us all, but don't build it like that. Of course they're not going to build their brand. It's like saying, oh, can you please cut up those peppers for me? Oh, don't cut them like that. I want them cut like this. Like, it's ridiculous. Like, it's just absolutely ridiculous. So yeah, I think my advice to the employer would be like, so are you going to be old and stuffy like everyone else, or are you actually going to be an innovative brand and encourage people to do this? Because this is part of their self-development. People are going to leave you regardless. If they're a partner, they're probably going to be there for a while, which is a good thing. But people will leave you regardless. No job is permanent. I am very aware of that with my team. I would say to them, I'm like, when you leave, and they're like, no, we're going to be here forever. I'm like, no. Eventually you will outgrow me, or I'll outgrow you, and that's how this works, and that's fine. Like, but if I can be a part of your journey and you can say great things about my employment when you leave, that's even better. But whilst you're here, if I can have a huge impact on your life so that you can have a huge impact on my business, that sounds like a great, fruitful exchange to me. So that is why I spend so much time and effort investing in their personal brands, because I want them to be big because it impacts my bottom line. That's how that works. But to your friend, some advice for her, I'm just going to do it anyway. You know, pay for him. We charge $2,500 for a personal branding website, babe. Come over to us, we'll sort you right out.
Right. Well, I tell you what, I'll have that conversation with her, Amelia. But also just a question about that, because an even better way of doing it, I think, would probably be if you were to persuade the business to change their mindset whilst you work primarily with people or exclusively with people. Is that a conversation if there's a senior partner of a law firm watching who does take this rather restrictive approach, would you be willing to seek to persuade him or her that they've got that back to front?
Brand messages that are shared by an individual's like social media versus a company's social media receive 24 times more engagement. Are shared 24 times more frequently. Brand messages that are shared for a personal social media versus a company's social media receive 8 times more views, etc. They also have leads that convert 7 times more frequently. 92% of individuals trust other individuals, even if they're strangers, recommendations over company recommendations, which basically means that every single one of the people that you're trying to attract as a customer could give 2 shits about your company brand. They care about what your people are saying, right? So if you can make your people advocates for your business and build trust with the people that may or may not be ready to buy from you yet, but might be at one point, you're going to get all the leads in the market before your competition. And if that doesn't convince you to be a bit more open in the way that you're thinking about your marketing, then okay, go die in a corner like every other dinosaur brand. But I guarantee you the brands like Steve and Alice Stevenson are building, they're going to be one taking all your business money because they really take this stuff seriously.
Yeah, they do. I mean, Alice is great, and the great thing about Alice's content is it's just completely authentic. It's nothing really to do with her being a lawyer. It's nothing to do with the
But
area
do you really
of law.
hire a lawyer because they're a lawyer? You hire them because you like them. So what better way to build up the trust is than to build the likability at scale? Like, I don't think anyone picks a marketing agency. Like, as I actually break down the buying decision, I don't think anyone picks an accountant, a lawyer, a marketing agency, a recruitment agency based on how good, obviously it factors in a little bit, but how good the output of that agency is, because you don't really know what their output's going to be like yet because you haven't worked with them. Pick them because you like them. That's why Alice has done what she's done. She's taken her likability and her personality and she's made her a competitive business advantage.
Yeah, I'm going to try and get Alice on here, actually. She's she's really inspirational. So we've talked about what a personal brand is and why it's important. But if you get a new client coming to you, so if a lawyer comes to you, or anyone for that matter comes to you and says, okay, you've persuaded me, what are the key objectives and steps that need to be taken if you were working with someone to build a personal brand?
Sure. I mean, look, there's 2 ways to do this. There's the strategic way and there's the I have no fucking idea what's going on way. So we'll cover both. The first way is, what is your North Star? And I don't mean I want to make more money. No, what is your North Star? What in your heart are you aiming for? Like I'm talking big picture stuff. Like my North Star is I want to hit £20 million in revenue by year 7. So everything is like driven towards that. But then my other North Star is I want people to be empowered to build their personal brands. They can take control of their life and then can take control of their destiny and have a better life for themselves, right? So those are my 2 North Stars. So what is your North Star, I think, is the first thing. And then in order for you to achieve that North Star, who do you need to be appealing to? Who is your audience? Everyone says, find your audience. What the fuck does that mean? No one knows. So work out what you want to achieve and then work out who you need to have in your circle to achieve it. It's a lot easier to do it that way than to try and like point at people and go, you're my audience. So for hypothetically for explanation reasons, if my North Star is to hit £20 million in revenue by year 7, for me to do that, I need to attract entrepreneurs, founders, leaders of other businesses, because that's who makes the buying decision to buy my services, right? And marketing too, but it's a kind of a sub audience. So those are the things those are the people I need to be attracting. So if those are the people that I need to be attracting, what should I be talking about that's going to resonate with them? Okay, well, I'm a business owner. They're a business owner. We'll talk about business. I hire people, they hire people. We're going to talk about leadership. I have lots of fuck ups in the business. They probably had lots of fuck ups in the business. So I'm going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about the trials and tribulations of, getting sued by someone or suing someone, or things that are relevant to those people's lives, right? Notice I haven't said personal branding once at this point. Those people then come into my network because they're like, oh my God, that happened to me. I like her. I like her no bullshit attitude or whatever. And naturally, the people that don't like me and don't like my no bullshit attitude, and I go, oh, I don't like her, and they're going to get pushed away. Excellent. I now have a very segmented audience who are in my top of the funnel. So I don't have to waste my time having conversations with people that aren't relevant to me. And then what I can do is once they've followed me and they go, oh, she's an interesting entrepreneur. She's doing all these things. Oh, she sells personal branding services. Oh, she has 140,000 followers. She must be pretty good at it. Hey, Amelia, been following you for 6 months. Would you mind having a chat with me about your personal brand? Boom, that's £100,000 a year. Thank you very much. That is how you build your personal brand, right? So what is your North Star? Who do you need to attract to achieve it? What do you need to be talking about to attract those people? So it's kind of like a tiered system. And you do that consistently. I've been doing this for 4 years, guys. It's not a quick fix, but we're 100% inbound business. We'll do 2.4 million quid this year, which I think for a year 3 business is not too shabby. So there is proof in this pudding.
It's pretty exceptional. It's pretty exceptional.
The other side of this is I have no idea what I'm doing. What is my North Star? What are my audience? All those things. I get it. I understand. Give yourself 6 weeks. Post about whatever it is that you want, within reason, obviously. We don't necessarily want to hear your shower thoughts, but whatever it is that you want for 6 weeks. And then at the end of the 6-week period, review what you enjoyed talking about, what your audience enjoyed you talking about. And then what you'll naturally find is the things that you probably liked talking about the most also aligns with what your audience actually quite liked you talking about. And then that's your plan. And then naturally you have a strategy that gets built off the back of that.
Yeah, I mean, what you just said there about you want to talk direct to the people who will influence you achieving your vision or your purpose, that's quite liberating as well, I find, because when I had my previous podcast, Success Won't Come Calling, it wasn't properly defined in terms of our audience. And we had some episodes, it was quite a generic podcast. We had some episodes which had 20,000 views, and people would come to me and say, wow, we've got 20,000 views. And I would think, oh, that's good, isn't it? And I was thinking, but why? What now? What does that actually mean in terms of me fulfilling the vision to which I've committed for myself? The reason why I found doing this podcast particularly liberating is because I'm talking directly to clients, to colleagues, to professional suppliers, to the people who have both helped me in business and on my own personal journey. And to be quite frank, when I set off on this most recent journey, I thought to myself, well, if I get 100 people who are interested in me, that's quite a lot. If you think that every one of those 100 people is someone who could facilitate me achieving my purpose. The fact we've got quite a lot more than 100 people, but that also we've got that same targeted, sophisticated bunch that I aim for is something I'm feeling really, really proud of. And what you've just described there about quality, not quantity, and always having an eye on your purpose is what I would encourage everyone to stay focused on.
Yeah, and I think there's a point there about vanity metrics. Like, it's really easy, as you've mentioned there, about to go, oh, I've got 20,000 views. Isn't that cool? Like, okay, so what now? But actually, if those 20,000 views are from people that are your targeted kind of audience and people that you really want to speak to, that's now like a 20,000 person sales team that you have. And if you keep them engaged, they will advocate for you. Like they really will mention you in route. Like I had someone message or comment actually on one of my team's posts today saying, oh, Amelia, your name got brought up in an interview I was at the other day about like how you run your one-to-ones. Like I didn't even know who you were, and I've come to find you here because someone mentioned your name in an interview. Like that's what you want. You want people to be talking about you and facilitating the business. So the vanity metrics don't matter to a degree, but if you're using software and social listening tools like we do, so we use Shield for LinkedIn, which is probably your primary channel if you're listening to this and you're a B2B lawyer. We use Shield. And on Shield, you can look at audience. So if my audience are all founders, executive directors, and that kind of stuff, and I have 140,000 of them, you better bet those vanity metrics matter, because that means 140,000 people of my ideal audience are now in my funnel. So yes, vanity metrics for the sake of them are not that important, but they do indicate if it's the right audience or not, whether or not your content is resonating.
Yeah, I mean, if you've got your right audience targeted and you're bringing them into the fold, then the bigger the better. Yeah, I completely agree. Obviously, it's not all about social media branding, but it's a key part of it. I've really enjoyed hearing you talk in the past about how social media perhaps is unfairly criticized for some of the toxicity, some of the problems that seem to have developed in society, in people, in business, everything from anxiety and depression, cyberbullying, terrible things like self-harm. Is social media to blame for those unfortunate, very, very traumatic instances when they arise?
Let's just be clear. Social media doesn't harm people. People harm people, right? Social media has just accelerated the rate in which they can harm other people. It's accelerated the rate in which harmful things appear in our lives, right? But and there's no getting away from that. People are not nice, and they do use social media to facilitate their not niceness. But I do think there is a lack of accountability from everyone in many aspects of their life. I have a lack of accountability when I turn up 10 minutes late to every single freaking PT session I've booked in my life because I'm always in a rush, right? That's me being not accountable for my time and also wasting my PT's time, right? That's an example of not being accountable. But I do think we lack incessantly and inherently, particularly in the West, a level of accountability for our own lives and what we let into our lives. So if you don't like what's on your social media feed, change it. If you don't like how it makes you feel, stop looking at it. If you don't like, looking at Snapchats of strangers that make you feel insecure and whatever, stop looking at it. It's not that difficult. And people talk about how, their mental health has been impacted by social media and how evil it is and all these things. And I understand, right? But social media hasn't given you those ailments. You have them yourself. And I think by being on social media has perhaps highlighted them to you. But there needs to be more of a conversation about why do you feel less than because she is pretty or he's successful? Why do you feel ugly? Why do you feel worthless? That's the conversation that needs to be had, not social media is really evil and we shouldn't let people post this stuff. It should be, okay, so Kim Kardashian, she looks how she looks and you feel like a piece of shit because she looks how she looks. Shouldn't we be talking to young people particularly about why do you feel like her beauty invalidates yours? Why do you feel like his Lamborghini makes you less able to be successful? That's the conversation that needs to be had. We need to instill confidence in people and instill a self-respect for ourselves that everyone is different and her beauty doesn't make you less any beautiful. Even his success doesn't make you any less successful. That's the conversation that needs to be had, not social media is terrible. Let's not do that because it's bad for your mental health. Take accountability. And then you'll find that actually social media can be a wonderful tool, just provided that you use it correctly.
That's it, isn't it? And also, I think you do need personal agency. And I'm not being unempathetic there because I do understand that if someone comes to the table with pre-existing mental health
By the way,
problems,
just for context, sorry to interrupt you, Simon, but
That's
I had
right.
an eating disorder, a very severe eating disorder actually when I was 18, 19, 20 years old. I was very, very skinny. I was 58 kilos, which for a 5'9" woman is pretty tiny. And a lot of that was perpetuated by I was following these people on Instagram and I was like, oh my God, they're so skinny. I need to be skinnier. It wasn't because of these people on Instagram. It's because of me. I chose to follow them. I chose to feel that way. I chose. And it wasn't until I chose to get help that it sorted itself out. So yes, I agree. Have empathy for people, but also look at yourself and ask yourself the hard questions of am I being a victim here or am I actually just really need to get some help myself and stop blaming other people for it?
Yeah, and perhaps rather than blame social media, the likes of governments and politicians and health authorities should be involved in that support process and perhaps the intervention process rather than seeking to delegate that responsibility to big tech. But you are right, personal agency does need to come into it strongly. What about just away from the sort of personal possible discussion there is to have on social media? What about just the for example, the political influence social media can have in spreading alleged fake news, perhaps directing people to resources which are unauthentic or not credible. Do you think that that's a feature of social media which is just an unintended consequence of the way algorithms work? So if I look, for example, I mean, I don't like Donald Trump, but if I was to consistently look at what Donald Trump said, and there's a lot of that which has been proven to be false, Google will keep serving me up more Trumpisms, and perhaps that's just an unintended consequence.
Yeah, look, just to be clear, how algorithms work is when you search for things consistently and you look at things consistently, the algorithms think that you like that stuff and they'll give you more of it, which on the face of it makes a lot of sense because it's automating what people want, right? Like if you consistently go and order the same coffee every single day, your barista learns what kind of coffee you like and they'll start making it before you even get there, right? But sometimes you might go, actually, I don't want that coffee today. And that's the thing that is missing from tech, right? And the only way that you can do that is by intervening yourself and go, hang on, before you make that, I want a different coffee. So you can say, I want to go and follow different people so that my algorithm isn't full of fucking Trump, right? It goes back to self-agency. Instead of complaining about all the shit that's in our feed, why don't you just curate the feed that you want to see? I intentionally follow people I don't like because I want to challenge my own opinions and I want to challenge how I think about things and I want my mind to be changed. And sometimes I just want to confirm that my opinion is actually correct and he is a bit of a douche. Like, that's what I want to follow. And so I've chosen to follow that. If I go on down the traditional route of like, oh, I'm just going to like all the content that I like and never be challenged in my thought process, I potentially could be really pushed into one political alignment, or I could be really pushed into one particular way of thinking because my algorithm is feeding me things that are confirming my biases and my opinions and not challenging them. So you need to take control over your life and actually go, do I want to be one of those people on social media that reshares things without doing my own research? One of them, or do I want to be someone who actually is quite a well-rounded individual who considers quite a few different people's perspectives before I decide that that's my actual opinion? And I think social media, Google, ChatGPT, whatever it is that you use, you're the one that inputs the data to get the data out. So you need to work out what data you're inputting and whether or not that's what's giving you back this kind of stuff, because chances are it probably is.
Yeah, I mean, I've got to let you go in a moment, but it's a fantastic way to end the podcast because I couldn't agree with you more. That to me, one of the things which social media gets criticized for, which is about, for example, giving a platform to people who are offensive and produce content which the majority disagree with, to me, that's an advantage of it. Because when I see content which I think is offensive, it gives me the opportunity to challenge it or to think about it and to try and think, well, have they got kind of a point? Or I want to push back, or I want to look at different perspectives. And I just think cancelling people, it deprives us of that opportunity. Toxic. Yeah, it is. It deprives us of the opportunity to reconsider our own opinion, to push back, or to engage in rational discourse. So perhaps it's the cancellation that's the problem, not giving the person we disagree with the platform.
Just to finish, I think that's a really good place to finish. One of the things that I was talking about with Ash, to kind of bring it back, because it's literally fresh in my mind, we did it last night. One of the things that we spoke about was the mob that social media has created, which is previously you only had to have a debate with your dad or your brother or your sister about topics, whereas now you have to have a debate with a million people online, right? And there is this mob mentality that human beings take on, where if one person attacks someone and that person says, yeah, actually, I agree with that person, everyone just piles on. And actually, there's been studies done to show that if a group of people decided to murder someone, 90% of people would get on board with that idea, because it's this mob pack mentality. And they would just go along with it, even though they know morally it's wrong, they would still do it because of this pack mentality that we all have. And it's obviously why we've survived as a species, right? It's because we come together. But I think to your point about cancellation, do you know what the opposite of not giving these people a platform is, and not allowing people to have this platform is? Fascism. And I don't want to live in a fascist society or a communist society. I've seen how that goes down in that side of the world. And I'm not really interested in being a part of that type of world. I want to live in a democracy, and part of democratic society is allowing people to say whatever the fuck it is they want to say and let them have the consequences of it, but don't cancel them for it. Don't take their platform away because you don't like it. We need to be challenged. Do you think Hitler would have been in power if he hadn't been challenged? No one challenged him. That is what fascism looks like, right? So do you want to live in that society? That is social media in a nutshell. It's fascism. Like with this whole like mob mentality is like, no, you're wrong, you must be cancelled. That's fascism. And yet the people that kind of get involved with that mob mentality are the people that will also be preaching the most about being liberal and being, living in this incredible world and stuff. It's like, actually, take a long, hard look about how you're operating, because it's the total opposite to what you're saying. So I think it's really important that we all think about these things when we're following people. And, Andrew Tate's a great example. The guy's been cancelled on every single platform. He has no access to pretty much anything anymore because the world decided that he was wrong. If he wants to make a tit of himself, let him. Who are we to take that platform away from him?
Use his platform to tell him he's wrong and to try and persuade him.
Yeah. And do you know what it's done? Just lastly, do you know what that's done? Sorry, I don't want to keep going on about it. It's such an important point to make.
Oh, please
Taking
do.
his platform away has actually given him more power.
It has.
Because all the people that are following him he's gone, see, told you everything I was saying was right. And everyone's got a million people that are following him gone, yeah. So that is how that works. So,
and you could go through practically every person who's ever been cancelled, and that same things happen. They become more popular and they find another platform such as Substack or one of those areas. I could talk about this final issue we've just touched on, Amelia, for a whole additional podcast, and I really hope that we'll have the opportunity in due course to have that same discussion. But I tell you what, I've found that absolutely invigorating. And everybody who's watching and listening who is interested in raising their profile, developing a personal brand, just because you're a lawyer and you want to come across as professional does not mean that some of the, or perhaps all of the principles that Amelia has shared with us and helped us with today don't apply to you. They do. You will make your own life and that of your career a lot more progressive and a lot more enjoyable if you take this on board. All of Amelia's links are in the description of the podcast, wherever you're getting it. Amelia, thank you so much for your company. Thank you so much for your expertise. It's been a pleasure. All the very best to you, and hopefully speak again soon.
Thanks so much for having me, Simon. I appreciate it.